car crashes can be sudden, tragic, and sometimes downright shocking. Throughout history, several fatal accidents have left lasting impressions due to their disturbing circumstances. From celebrity tragedies to bizarre collisions, these stories remind us how fragile life is and how quickly everything can change in a blink. Brian Dunn wasn't just a TV personality or a daredevil stuntman. He was a symbol of a generation that grew up on outrageous humor, bruises turned into entertainment, and the kind of fearlessness that made Jackass a cultural phenomenon. Known for his quick wit, signature beard, and willingness to do just about anything for a laugh, Ryan had a larger-than-life presence. But on June 20th, 2011, that presence was suddenly and tragically silenced, not on a film set, not during a stunt, but in a high-speed car crash that took his life and the life of his friend Zachary Hartwell. It was just after 2:30 a.m. in West Goshen Township, Pennsylvania. Dunn was behind the wheel of his Porsche 911 GT3, a sleek, high-performance machine built for speed. His passenger, Zachary, was a close friend and fellow daredevil in his own right, a former Navy SEAL and production assistant. Just hours before, Ryan had posted a photo of the two of them out drinking, seemingly carefree, smiling. It looked like a normal night out, but it would end in devastation. At a speed estimated between 130 and 140 miles per hour, the car veered off the road, struck a guardrail, plowed through trees, and burst into flames. The wreckage was so severe that the vehicle was barely recognizable. Both men were killed on impact. Dunn was only 34. The aftermath was both shocking and sobering. Toxicology reports revealed that Ryan's blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. It was a deadly combination: speed, alcohol, and a powerful vehicle. Fans who had grown up watching him survive seemingly impossible stunts were suddenly confronted with the brutal reality that no one, not even the most fearless, is invincible. The news hit hard. The entertainment world reeled, and his Jackass co-stars were devastated. Bam Margera, Dunn's longtime best friend, was inconsolable, weeping at the crash site, struggling to process the loss. Social media lit up with tributes, memories, and a collective sense of heartbreak. Ryan wasn't just the guy who pulled ridiculous stunts on screen. He was a loyal friend, a beloved son, and someone who had a genuine, unforgettable presence. But the tragedy also sparked difficult conversations. While many mourned Ryan, others couldn't ignore the harsh truth. Drunk driving had ended not just his life, but someone else's too. It wasn't a prank gone wrong. It wasn't a skit. It was real life with irreversible consequences. And for many fans, especially those who admired his carefree persona, it served as a painful wake-up call. In some ways, Dunn's death marked the end of an era. Jackass had always pushed boundaries between pain and comedy, danger and entertainment. But this was different, this was serious, and this was final. And it forced people to confront the very real risks behind the reckless image that had been so carefully cultivated on screen. Today, Ryan Dunn is remembered with a mix of laughter and sorrow. He made millions laugh with his fearless antics, but his death left a heavy imprint, a reminder that life isn't a stunt show, and that choices, even in the blink of an eye, can change everything. For all the laughs he gave the world, his final lesson was the most serious of all. If you thought old Hollywood was all glitz and glamour, wait till you hear about Jane Mansfield, the woman who could turn heads just by walking into a room or crashing through a pile of photographers. Jane was not just another blonde bombshell in the Marilyn Monroe mold. She was. Marilyn cranked up to 11 with a love for dramatic entrances, outrageous publicity stunts, and a personality as big as her beehive. In the 1950s and early 60s, she was everywhere, starring in films splashed across tabloids and making waves with her signature look-at-me attitude. She was a master at grabbing attention and was always ready to shake things up with a jaw-dropping outfit or a headline-making stunt. But by the mid-60s, the spotlight had started to dim. Movie roles were getting scarcer, and the Hollywood buzz was cooling down. Even so, Jane was not one to fade quietly away. She kept pushing herself with nightclub performances and television appearances and worked hard to stay in the public eye. It was during one of these late-night gigs that fate would decide to slam the brakes literally. On June 29, 1967, Jane was traveling through the South in a shiny Buick Electra, making her way from a nightclub show in Mississippi to another engagement in New Orleans. Riding shotgun was her driver, Ronnie Harrison, and in the passenger seat was her boyfriend and lawyer, Sam Brody. The back seat held her 3 kids, including her youngest daughter, Mariska Hargitay, who would one day become a famous actress in her own right. The night was dark and the roads were slick with the kind of fog that was not natural but caused by a truck spraying insecticide to kill mosquitoes and keep the bugs away. This mosquito fog was thick like smoke, and it severely reduced visibility, making it nearly impossible to see what was ahead. At about 2 a.m. near Slidell, Louisiana, the Buick slammed into the back of a slow-moving tractor trailer that had pulled over behind the insecticide truck. The impact was devastating, and the Buick slid underneath the trailer, shearing off the roof of the car in a terrifying scene that looked like something straight out of a disaster movie. Jane, Sam, and Ronnie died instantly, while the children in the back seat miraculously escaped with only minor injuries. The crash sent shockwaves through Hollywood and the world of fans who were stunned by the sudden loss of such a larger-than-life star. Almost immediately, the rumor mill went wild, and one of the most enduring and morbid myths about Jane's death took hold. People claimed that she had been decapitated in the crash, creating an image that was both gruesome and unforgettable. In reality, Jane was not decapitated, though she did suffer severe head trauma. The confusion likely began because one of her famous blonde wigs was thrown from the car during the crash and was found tangled in the wreckage. This wig was mistaken for part of her scalp, and that simple misunderstanding turned into decades of gossip and urban legend. Despite the horror of the crash, the aftermath brought about a practical change in trucking safety. The government required the addition of rear underride guards on tractor trailers, those metal bars you see on the backs of big rigs that prevent cars from sliding underneath in a collision. These safety bars are often called Mansfield bars in her honor, since her tragic accident highlighted the need for better protection. Jane Mansfield's life may have ended too soon in a shocking way, but her legacy lives on through Hollywood lore, her daughter's successful career, and in the very real improvements to road safety that save lives every day. She was a blazing star who knew how to make an entrance, and even in death, her story continues to captivate and remind us all how fragile and unpredictable life can be. Sam Kinison was a force of nature, a comedian whose voice alone could fill a room and whose energy was impossible to ignore. Known for his screaming, intense style, he carved a unique niche in the world of stand-up comedy during the late 1980s and early 1990s. But behind that loud, wild persona was a complex man who had gone from being a preacher to one of the most memorable and controversial comedians of his time. Sadly, his life was cut short in a tragic car crash in 1992, ending the career of a man who had so much more to offer. On April 10, 1992, near Needles, California, Kenison's life came to a sudden and tragic end. He was driving his 1989 Pontiac Turbo Trans Am on the highway when his car crossed over into the opposite lane and collided head-on with a pickup truck driven by a 16-year-old driver. The collision was fatal, and Kenison died instantly at the scene. The exact cause of the accident remains unclear, with questions about whether it was due to speed, driver error, or other factors. Regardless of the details, the result was devastating not just for those involved, but for fans and the entertainment world as a whole. Kenison's death came as a shock. He was at the height of his career, a time when many comedians might have been settling into their fame, but he was still pushing boundaries. His comedy wasn't for everyone. His screaming, raw style was polarizing, but there was no denying his impact. He brought a kind of honest, sometimes painful energy to the stage, exploring topics like love, heartbreak, and frustration in a way few others dared. His background as a preacher gave him a unique edge, mixing religious themes with his explosive delivery to create a brand of comedy that was as intense as it was hilarious. The accident itself was tragic, not only because of Kenison's death, but also because it involved a teenager behind the wheel of the pickup truck. The collision was sudden and severe, a stark reminder of how fragile life can be, no matter how loud or bold you are. For someone like Kenison, who seemed larger than life, it was a harsh reminder that fame and personality cannot shield you from tragedy. In the years since his death, Kenison's legacy has been remembered with a mix of admiration and reflection. His style influenced many comedians who followed, especially those who combine vulnerability with raw, emotional intensity. He was never just a loud guy yelling jokes. He was a man who used his voice to express frustration, pain, and humor all at once. The suddenness of his passing only added to the mythos around him, a cautionary tale of a life lived fast and a career cut short. Kenison's death also highlights a broader truth about the risks we take, whether on the road or in life. Accidents can happen in a split second, and sometimes even the biggest personalities can be vulnerable. The details of the crash may never be fully known, but the loss is deeply felt. For fans, colleagues, and family, it was the end of an era and a painful reminder of the unpredictability of life. General George S. Patton was one of the most celebrated and formidable military leaders of World War II. Known for his aggressive tactics, fiery speeches, and fearless leadership, Patton played a pivotal role in many of the Allies' major victories. His reputation as a bold and sometimes controversial figure preceded him, and he was often seen as the embodiment of American military strength and determination. After the war ended in Europe in 1945, many expected Patton to continue influencing the military and political landscape. However, his life was cut short in a tragic accident that shocked the world and left a lasting mark on history. On December 9, 1945, Patton was traveling near Mannheim, Germany. He was in his personal Cadillac, a vehicle he famously preferred because it symbolized his style and status. The war was over, but Patton remained deeply involved in overseeing the post-war occupation and the reorganization of American forces in Europe. While driving on a road near the city, Patton's car collided with an American Army truck. The crash was severe, and Patton sustained catastrophic injuries. He suffered a broken neck and a spinal cord injury that left him paralyzed from the neck down. For a man known for his robust energy, physical fitness, and commanding presence on the battlefield, this was a devastating and ironic turn of fate. After the accident, Patton was rushed to a military hospital where he received the best medical care available at the time. Despite the efforts of doctors and surgeons, the extent of his injuries meant that his condition was extremely serious. Patton was unable to move or speak clearly, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed his commands. As days passed, his health deteriorated further due to complications common in such severe spinal injuries. He developed a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot that travels to the lungs and can be fatal. This complication ultimately caused his death on December 21, 1945, just 12 days after the accident. Patton was 60 years old. The news of his death stunned the public and military community alike. Patton had survived some of the most brutal battles in history, facing enemy fire and life-threatening situations repeatedly. Yet he died not in combat, but because of a peacetime traffic accident. This unexpected outcome led to widespread disbelief and sadness. The general's death also sparked numerous conspiracy theories. Some speculated that Patton was assassinated because of his outspoken criticism of Allied post-war policies, especially his distrust of the Soviet Union and his desire to continue military actions against them. Others suggested covert government plots or political motives behind his death. However, no credible evidence has ever been found to support these claims. The official conclusion remains that his death was the result of a tragic accident compounded by medical complications. Patton's passing marked the end of an era in military leadership. He was among the last generals to personify the aggressive frontline command style that defined World War II's ground campaigns. His leadership was often direct and demanding, inspiring fierce loyalty from some soldiers while earning criticism from others for his temper and strict discipline. After Patton, the U.S. military began evolving towards more strategic and technology-driven approaches, but his legacy of boldness and determination continued to influence military culture. The funeral for General Patton was held with full military honors, a testament to his immense contributions and iconic status. Leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike came to pay their respects to a man who had become a symbol of courage and resolve. His life story, filled with victories, controversies, and an untimely death, remains a compelling chapter in American history. Reflecting on Patton's life and death, one cannot help but acknowledge the unpredictability of fate. Despite his formidable strength and remarkable achievements, his life was ended abruptly by circumstances far removed from the battlefield. His story reminds us that even those who seem invincible are vulnerable, and that sometimes life's greatest challenges come when we least expect them. General George S. Patton's legacy endures not only through his military successes, but also through the human story of resilience, tragedy, and the fragile nature of life. Lisa Lopez, better known as Left Eye, was one of those rare stars who owned the 90s with her fearless style, killer rap verses, and unforgettable personality. As the fiery rapper of the legendary girl group TLC, she was the perfect mix of wild creativity and raw talent. Everyone loved her for that quirky energy, her signature eye tattoo, hence the nickname, and her willingness to speak her truth no matter what. But sadly, Her bright star burned out way too soon on April 25, 2002, in a tragic car crash in Honduras that shocked fans worldwide. So let's dive into what happened that day, because it wasn't just any accident. It was a moment that still haunts many who admired Lisa. At the time, Lisa was in Honduras on a trip that was pretty close to her heart. She'd been working on charity projects there and was trying to connect with the country's culture and spirituality. It was a place she loved and wanted to give back to. On that day, she was driving her Mitsubishi Montero Sport SUV near the city of La Ceiba, a beautiful coastal town known for gorgeous beaches and, well, some seriously twisty roads. Here's where the story turns tragic. The road where Lisa's crash happened is famous for sharp bends and curves that demand your full attention while driving. Unfortunately, on that particular curve, Lisa lost control of her SUV. Eyewitness accounts and reports suggest she may have swerved suddenly, some say, to avoid a dog or some other obstacle on the road. But whatever the cause, the vehicle flipped multiple times. When we say flipped, we mean it rolled over at least 2 or 3 times before coming to a stop. The force was so intense that the SUV was left badly damaged. A brutal reminder of how serious the accident was. Adding to the tragedy, Lisa wasn't wearing a seatbelt when the crash happened. This fact is heartbreaking because seatbelts save lives, and wearing one might have made a difference in how this story ended. But the impact was so severe that Lisa suffered fatal head injuries. She was alone in the car, and despite emergency teams arriving quickly, she was pronounced dead at the scene. Just like that, one of music's brightest lights went out at the young age of 30. What's especially painful about this crash is how sudden and shocking it was. Lisa wasn't involved in any risky behavior like drinking or reckless driving. In fact, she was known to be cautious. The exact details about the cause remain a bit murky, with speculation about the road's condition, possible distraction, or that sudden swerve to avoid something. But the bottom line is that the accident happened in a split second, and the consequences were devastating. The news of Lisa's death spread like wildfire. Fans around the world were devastated, and fellow musicians mourned the loss of an irreplaceable talent. TLC's future was forever changed, and tributes poured in from everywhere, honoring her creativity, passion, and unforgettable personality. It was clear that Lisa Lopez wasn't just a rapper, she was a force of nature who had touched millions with her music and spirit. In the aftermath, her death sparked conversations about road safety, especially regarding seatbelt use, and the dangers of sharp curves on roads like the ones in Honduras. It was a grim reminder that accidents can happen to anyone, anywhere, even stars with bright futures ahead.